Today we see the Victoria Police are starting a Viper Squad because of the violence on the streets because of the bikies that have been allowed into this state. The Andrews Labor government could have prevented this nearly 8 years ago. They had an opportunity to introduce legislation to ensure bikies were not welcome in Victoria. But what we've seen from the Andrews Labor government is they watered down those laws against recommendations from the Victoria Police, who said they needed tougher powers to stop these bikies coming in from other states. Queensland brought in these laws, and what we've seen up there is less bikies in Queensland. New South Wales brought them in, less bikies in New South Wales. The only government that wouldn't bring them in was the Andrews Labor government. They refused to have the tougher laws that are required to stop bikies here in this state. For Daniel Andrews to come out and say it's because of our Charter of Human Rights is an absolute disgrace, considering he abused that Charter of Human Rights to lock down people in the North Melbourne Towers last year. He abused that Charter of Human Rights to lock down Victorians for longer than anywhere else in the world. And to now use the Charter of Human Rights to protect bikies so they can wear their patches is totally disgraceful and disrespectful to every Victorian. We know that the violence on the streets has only increased because of a failure of action of the Andrews Labor government. And the Victoria Police are doing their best. They're doing their bit to ensure we stay safe. But to now put 80 police officers in the way and in danger's way with these bikies running rampant across our state is not only disrespectful to Victorians, but disrespectful to those very police officers. We need more police on the street. We need police stations that are supposed to be open 24 hours open. But we see more and more police put to task force because the Andrews Labor government have failed to be tough where they were required to. And that included ensuring that bikies were not welcome here in this state. Daniel Andrews needs to take a really hard look at himself by creating Victoria as the paradise for bikies here in Australia. And we've seen them move down here in great numbers. At the same time that our population is decreasing with the everyday Victorians, our population of bikies is increasing because Daniel Andrews has rolled out the welcome mat. The Andrews Labor government have got a lot to answer when it comes to bikies here in our state, and as violence increases. We can't afford to go back to the days of the Carlton crew, when it was on the media every night that someone was being shot, and eventually innocent victims in restaurants were being killed because these wars got out of hand. And the Andrews Labor government had every opportunity to stop this. They had advice from senior police to stop this. They would have support from the Liberal and Nationals government or opposition now to stop this. However, they've chosen not to. This is a choice of Daniel Andrews. We'll say today, the Liberal and Nationals are willing to work with any government to ensure that we send a very strong message. Bikies, you're not welcome in Victoria. We want to be a safe state. We want to be a safe place for families. And the only way to do that is to reintroduce those laws, make sure they're strong enough as recommended by Victoria Police, and then we can have safe streets here in our state. Daniel Andrews, I throw the challenge to you. Roll up the welcome mat. Let's introduce these laws. Let's work together, because at the end of the day, it's about community safety and we can't afford to see this violence increase on the streets. I have to say, I hope the Viper Task Force does, and I know the police do an amazing job. When they bring in some of these task forces around organised crime, the results have generally been pretty good. What we do say, though, is it shouldn't have been in this position. The Victoria Police, the senior police that are now organising this squad, were probably the same ones that advised the government. If you had brought the right laws in at the right time, we wouldn't have had these issues here in the state now.
And the Chief Commissioner of Police was asked just before whether or not he was receiving pressure from the government to have photos of guns on tables to show that they're doing something about this. It's an election year. Do you think this announcement is tied up in that, or trying to prove to everybody that we're doing something about it?
The Andrews Labor government have a history of being softer when it comes to some of the crime issues here in the state, and as they get close to elections, they like to appear very tough. What we've seen, though, if they had have acted at the right time 8 years ago, we wouldn't have had these issues today, and we wouldn't need photos of firearms. What we're seeing at the moment in the media almost nightly is bikie gangs. We've seen one with shots all the way across his chest. This is not the image we want for Victoria. It's not just about safety. It's about rebuilding our confidence in the state It's about people investing in the state. If you're sitting overseas and thinking, where am I going to invest in Australia? And the story you see from Victoria is a guy with gunshots across his chest from a bikie war, that's not where you're going to put your money. We need to make sure that we have tourism back. If you're going on holidays, the only thing that's ever attracted to Victoria in the past, we had the Carlton Crew, which then people could talk about and created a whole movie series. We don't want that today. We want people to come here and feel safe. If the Andrews Labor government acted at the right time and turned around instead of using an excuse of a Charter of Human Rights so people could wear a patch on their back to be involved in gangs, we would not be here today.
We do have anti-association laws here. They've never been used though by police. If you were to be in government, would you work with Victoria Police to streamline those laws or to make them easier to use?
100%. Those laws, when they were brought in, they were warned by the police they couldn't be used. They watered them down so much so that the Victoria Police could not use them in our state. If they had followed what Queensland did, then they would have actually seen the results what Queensland's got. Bikies want to move out from the Sunshine State so they can move to Bikies Paradise in Victoria, where they can nearly literally get away with murder. And that murder is one day going to be a victim on the street who was innocently walking past. We can't afford that. We need to make sure that we get onto this now. Will we fix it? Yes, we will. We'll work with whoever it takes. I don't want to wait to an election. I don't want the photos of the guns on the tables. I want Daniel Andrews to give me a call and we'll sit down and work out what we need to do as a government and an opposition with the only thing on our mind: how do we keep Victoria safe and rebuild the confidence so people don't be afraid to come down here because media stories are about bikies shooting each other on the street.
What will you do? Do you have any immediate?
Yep, the Queensland legislation. The Queensland legislation banned things like patches. That meant the bikie gangs couldn't associate with each other because it was a lot harder to even identify who was who. They're all about image. You don't see a Hell's Angel hanging out with a Comanchero. Why? Because they've got different patches and they hate each other. So if you actually put the patches and take the patches away, then all of a sudden you've got no environment for those bikies to want to stay in the state. You bring in laws that when they do hang out with each other, when they've got a history of crime, that they can be charged, like they can in Queensland. We said that was against our Charter of Human Rights. Daniel Andrews was super quick to say he doesn't care about Charter of Human Rights when it came to refugees in North Melbourne, in the towers, during lockdowns. He was super quick to say the Charter of Human Rights doesn't apply during COVID when he was locking the state down. But he uses it as an excuse that bikies can wear a patch. No one thinks that's fair. No one thinks that makes sense. And everybody knows that's not in the best interest of safety in this state.